Hello class and welcome to the lesson 5 video. In this lesson we'll be talking about Absalom's rebellion. So there's a lot to cover here, so let's get started. So if you remember in the last lesson, Absalom had just returned to Jerusalem. He was in exile, but now he's back in Jerusalem and David has forgiven him. So David's forgiven him, but it appears that Absalom still isn't on great terms with David, because the first thing that we read about is here that he's going to do is he's going to try to overthrow David. So he has this plot that starts to that we read about. So his plan is to win the support of the people, and a few of the things that we read about how he does that is, first it says that he provided himself with chariots and horses and 50 men to run before him. So the purpose of that is, just think about if you're an Israelite back in the day and you saw this large group of people pass by, all these chariots and horses and all these men running by, you would think like, oh, okay, whoever that person is that's in this group, they must be really important, they must be wealthy, a leader. So he's trying to build up an image for himself there. Now it says that Absalom would rise early and stand beside the way to the gate. So you might not immediately understand the purpose of that, but back in the day, when people had like a lawsuit or something, a case that they'd have to be, that nowadays we would go to a judge for, they would actually go to the king, who would give a judgment on it. And if the king couldn't do it, then he might have someone he appointed, a deputy, who would rule over that case. So that's why these people are going here. And the gate that they're talking about, I'm not sure if it's the gate to the city or the gate to the king's palace, but either way, this is where all the people are passing by to get their case heard, right? So Absalom's there, and he stops the people passing by, and it actually seems that he's trying to make small talk with them and trying to get on the good side, because it says that he'll ask, what city they are, that they're from, what tribe they're from, what their case is about. And he would hear their case and tell them, oh yeah, you got a good case. But here he tried to plant some seeds of doubt into David's role, and he'd say things like, oh, you got a good case, but there's just no one to rule over your case today. There's no deputy appointed. You're just not going to get justice today. But if I were in charge, I would see your case, and you would surely get justice there. So he's building himself up in front of the people so that they would think if he was in charge, things would be better. So he does this for a while, and it actually does work, because he does actually, in verse 6, it says that he stole the hearts of the men of Israel. So it is working. So he's doing this for some time, and then in verse 7, just a quick note, it does say that came to pass after 40 years. Just a quick note, some scholars think that this 40 years is a misprint and it should say 4 years. Other people think that the 40 years is referencing to when David's rule began, but the point is the same, that he's been doing this for a while and he's built up some support. So after some time of Absalom doing this, he moves on to this next phase, which he goes to King David and he tells him that he needs to go. He asks him if he can go to Hebron, which David says, okay, yeah, it's fine. The reason he gives David is he says that he had a vow that he made when he was in exile, and he needs to, complete it in Hebron. So really, this is just a cover-up, because really what he's doing is, if you read on, he's sent messengers all throughout the land of Israel, telling everyone how he's going to overthrow David. Basically, when he arrives in Hebron, trumpet's going to blow. And as soon as they hear the trumpet, everyone's going to say that Absalom reigns in Hebron. So he's got this plot. He's got the support of the people. So this is bad news for David. But luckily, one of David's messengers hears about this, and he goes and he warns David about what's happening. So once David hears about this, he immediately decides that he needs to flee Jerusalem, along with all his household and all the men there with him. It's a big group of them that leave. He does have to leave behind a few people. If you read in verse 16, he leaves behind his concubines to take care of the house, which is going to come into play later, so just remember that. Some of the men who followed David, one of them was Ittai. I believe that's how you say it. Ittai the Gittite. David's particularly impressed by this man's loyalty because he's a foreigner. He's not even a real Israelite. He's a foreigner, but he still chooses to follow David. So it's very interesting there. And I put a thought question there about the loyalty that he shows there, and apply it to our lives, how loyal we should be to God. So read that, think about that. Some other people who follow David are Zadok and Abiathar, who were the priests at that time, along with all the Levites that are with them, and they bring the ark. So they're fleeing with David, but David actually tells them that they need to go back to Jerusalem along with the ark. And David's reason is basically, if the Lord, if it's the Lord's will that David return to Jerusalem and see the ark, then that's what will happen. But another reason is he's going to be able to use Zadok and Abiathar to help him out from Jerusalem later. That'll come into play. So David's making his way up to the Mount of Olives while he's fleeing, along with all his followers. And it's there that he learns that one of his counselors, it was one of his wisest counselors, his name was Ahithophel. He's actually joined Absalom's rebellion. So Absalom's got the support of a lot of the people, even some of David's higher ups are joining Absalom's rebellion. So this is looking really bad for David. It's also while he's on the Mount of Olives that he meets a friend of his named Hushai. And David's actually going to be able to use him because Hushai actually wants to join David, but David says, no, it'd actually be better if you could go back to Jerusalem and help me out through there. So that's David's thinking ahead. He's sending people back to Jerusalem who are going to be able to help him. As I said, things are looking bad for David. People are not on his side. The next section I won't talk too much about, but you'll read about how even some of Saul's relatives turn against David. Zebo, Mephibosheth's servant, and a man named Shimei. They're all turning against David. It's not looking great. So now that Absalom seems like things are going his way, he starts making his way to Jerusalem along with all his followers and Ahithophel, remember the David's counselor who joined him. It's here that actually Hushai meets up with Absalom and pledges his loyalty to him. And remember, this is David's inside man. Absalom's a little skeptical, but he does let him join him. Also, once Absalom gets back to Jerusalem, he does find David's concubines, and he actually takes them for himself. So I put a thought question there for you to read 2 Samuel chapter 12, verse 11 through 12. If you remember, Nathan gave some warnings about what would happen because of the sin that David did with Bathsheba. So read that, think about that. It's very interesting. But now that Absalom is here, he's trying to figure out what his next move should be. And here is where David's plan to have Hushai go back really pays off, because Absalom asks Ahithophel what he should do. And Ahithophel said, you need to go give me men right now, and I'll go pursue David, and we can get him right now. But Hushai says that he needs to wait, because David's forces are too strong, and you need to wait till you gather all your forces. So luckily, Absalom is convinced by Hushai and agrees to this. And this is very helpful to David, because if Absalom would have listened to Ahithophel, who knows what would have happened. But because he didn't, this gives David a chance to flee. So Hushai tells Zadok and Abiathar, those priests who are still there, to send a message to David about what just happened, and that David really needs to continue fleeing through the rest of the night. Now, once Ahithophel learns that Absalom's not going to take his advice, he knows that their chance to basically win against David is over, that David's going to be able to gather his forces and fight against Absalom. And also, David knows that he betrayed him, so he's thinking that David's going to kill him. So it's at this point that Ahithophel actually returns back to his home He makes sure he has everything in order for his household, and he hangs himself. So it's a very sad ending for Ahithophel, but he did betray David, who was the Lord's anointed. So um, I know that was a lot. This talk about a lot happens in this section of reading. So um, hopefully some of that will stick, but really you need to read the text. Maybe read it a little bit slower just so you understand, because a lot does happen. But keep up with the reading, answer your questions, and we will see you in the next video. So thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.